Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities or take pleasure in doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It's a long purport, so please be attentive. The Supreme Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa cannot be seen by a present conditioned vision. In order to see Him, one has to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life, full of spontaneous love of Godhead. When Śrī Kṛṣṇa was personally present on the face of the globe, not everyone could see Him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Materialists like Rāvaṇa, Hiraṇyakaśipu, Kaṁsa, Jarāsandha and Śiśupāla were highly qualified personalities by acquisition of material assets, but they were unable to appreciate the presence of the Lord. Therefore, even though the Lord may be present before our eyes, it is not possible to see Him unless we have the necessary vision. This necessary qualification is developed by the process of devotional service only, beginning with hearing about the Lord from the right source. The Bhagavad-gītā is one of the most popular literatures which are generally heard, chanted, repeated, etc. by the people in general. But in spite of such hearing, etc., sometimes it is experienced that the performer of such devotional service does not see the Lord eye to eye. The reason is that the first item, śravaṇa, is very important. If hearing is from the right source, it acts very quickly. Generally, people hear from unauthorized persons. Such unauthorized persons may be very learned by academic qualifications, but because they do not follow the principles of devotional service, hearing from them becomes a sheer waste of time. Sometimes, the texts are interpreted fashionably to suit their own purposes. Therefore, first, one should select a competent and bona fide speaker and then hear from him. When the hearing process is perfect and complete, the other processes become automatically perfect in their own way. There are different transcendental activities of the Lord, and each and every one of them is competent to bestow the desired result, provided the hearing process is perfect. In the Bhagavatam, the activities of the Lord begin from His dealings with the Pandavas. There are many other pastimes of the Lord in connection with His dealings with the Asuras and others. And in the 10th canto, these sublime dealings with His conjugal associates, the Gopis, as well as with His married wife Dwarka, are mentioned. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no difference in the transcendental nature of each and every dealing of the Lord. But sometimes people, in an unauthorized hearing process, take more interest in hearing about His dealings with the Gopis. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer. So a bona fide speaker of the dealings of the Lord never indulges in such hearings. One must hear about the Lord from the very beginning, as in the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other scriptures, and that will help the hearer attain perfection by progressive development. One should not therefore consider that his dealings with the Pandavas are less important than his dealings with the Gopis. We must always remember that the Lord is always transcendental to all mundane attachment. In all the above-mentioned dealings of the Lord, He is a hero in all circumstances, and hearing about Him or about His devotees or combatants is conducive to spiritual life. It is said that the Vedas and Puranas, etc., are all made to revive a lost relation with Him. Hearing of all the scriptures is essential. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshur Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sva Padanti Kam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamnan Shri Gurun Vaishnavanashta Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raguna Tanvitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Nitamsha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Shanvanti Gayanti Gayanant Abhikshanashat Swaranti Nandanti Tavehitam Janaha Taeva Pashyan Achirena Tabakam Bhava Pravaho Paramam Padam Bhujam. So, this is one of the prayers of Queen Kunti. Yesterday, we had explained that the nature of a devotee is he is always glorifying the Supreme Lord. In this verse, many significant points are being made, and we shall examine the various salient points that are being highlighted by Queen Kunti. Shanvanti Gayanti. Shanvanti means to hear. Gayanti means to chant. So, chanting and hearing of the transcendental names of the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord are most important. What does Queen Kunti say? She says that in chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord, one gets pleasure, happiness, and as a result of this, one can meditate at the lotus feet of the Lord and become free from the cycle of birth and death. The goal of human life is to become free from the cycle of birth and death. So, Shanvanti Gayanti. We must mold our lives in such a manner that we can always chant and hear the transcendental glories of the Lord. We should not think that the transcendental glories of the Lord have a limit, and if we cross that limit, then life will become boring. Just like when you preach Krishna consciousness to the materialists, they will say, okay, we agree, but there's a limit. Not that you chant all the time. When you're preaching to the Hindus and all, what do they say? Okay, there's a limit. You can chant the names of God for 10-15 minutes, but then you must not do any more. But the scriptures say there is no limit to the glorification of the Lord that can be offered by his devotee. So Queen Kunti is saying, one who constantly hears and chants, because if we constantly hear and chant, then we will also remember the Lord. But if we don't chant and hear, then you cannot remember the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj has offered 9 paths for succeeding spiritually. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smarnam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandyam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedam. So, Shravanam, Kirtanam is the same as Shanvanti and Gayanti. Chant and hear. But Vishnu Smarna means to remember the Lord. Now, you cannot remember the Lord till you have chanted and you have heard about Him. Just like in our ordinary dealings. Sometimes you may be talking to a friend about somebody else. Then whatever you're talking, you will remember that, isn't it? Suppose you're talking with with a friend about some other person for 2-3 hours. Then you will also remember him. Suppose you're talking about somebody before you go to sleep. Then there's a good chance that you will even dream about him. But if you don't talk about somebody, then you cannot remember him, isn't it? Just like sometimes you may get a letter from your mother or father or somebody, or your friend. So when you get that letter, you remember that devotee, isn't it? But when you don't have that letter in front, you don't remember. So similarly, when you talk about somebody, you will remember that somebody. But if you don't talk about that somebody, you cannot remember. So, therefore, Queen Kunti is saying, Shravanti Gayanti. Chant and hear your transcendental glories. As we were explaining yesterday, Rupa Goswami has said, 1 tongue and 2 ears is not enough. One must have millions of tongues, Rupa Goswami says, and they should all be used to glorify the Lord. So we are very lucky. We only have to control 1 tongue. Imagine if you had 1,000 tongues and your business was to engage all the 1,000 tongues in service of Krishna. How difficult it would have been. Because even with 1 tongue, we have to struggle, isn't it? So, one must hear about the glories of the Lord constantly. Just like in the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says, Shanvata Swakatha Krishna. Those who are my glory, Shanvata Katha Krishna, Punya Shavana Kirtana, hear thee unto Srovadani, Vidu Noti Surat Satam. This is, the statement of the Bhagavatam, not Gita. In this slok, Krishna is saying that by hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord, the abhadranis, the material desires from the heart, they will be liquidated. But if we don't hear, then to free ourselves from the material desires is impossible. So, hearing, and Krishna says in the Gita, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam. So, Satatam means constantly. Abhikshanasha. In this verse, the word is Abhikshanasha. Abhikshanasha means constantly. So the same point is being made in the Bhagavad-gītā where Krishna says Satatam. Satatam also means constantly. So, in order to cross over the cycle of birth and death, Queen Kunti is saying that we must dovetail our life in such a manner that we will be able to develop love of God. It is said that one who is on the path of devotional service, he understands that Sharanagati. Sharanagati means taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, is the only practical formula for protection. Just like Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj told the Lord that the materialist is thinking, now I have my father and mother, so they will give me protection. But the father and mother can only give protection if the Lord wants you to have protection. Sometimes we see that in an operation, one patient may die and another person may survive, isn't it? Just like a few days ago, they had a plane crash in New York. Some people may have died and few people got saved. How did that happen? How does it happen? So ultimately it is under the control of the Supreme Lord. It is not that now I have my father and mother, now I have my bank balance, now I have this arrangement, so I have security. No. Sharanagati means to depend upon the Lord. Now, in a material situation, to depend upon somebody's mercy is very undesirable. Nobody wants to be dependent upon somebody else, isn't it? But in spiritual life, to be dependent upon Krishna, to be dependent upon the mercy of the Lord is a very favorable situation for spiritual advancement. Because the devotee is dependent upon the mercy of the Lord, he recognizes that ultimately, unless I have the mercy of the Lord, I cannot succeed in my endeavor. Therefore the devotee Krishna says, Ye yatha mam prapadayante. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So the degree of protection we get from Krishna is directly based upon our degree of surrender. So, one aspect of Sharanagati, just like our Vancouver farm is called Sharanagati. So one aspect of Sharanagati is to completely depend upon Krishna. Now, depending upon Krishna does not mean that we do not make the effort. Like in English language, they say, God helps those who help themselves, isn't it? Those who will make the effort, God will reciprocate. So our understanding of Krishna consciousness is that we never want to be a burden on the Lord. We always want to be an asset to the Lord. So, Krishna, if he wanted, he could easily have killed all the soldiers on the battle of Kurukshetra, isn't it? He had made the arrangement by which they would die. But still Krishna wanted Arjuna to shoot the arrow and get the credit, isn't it? He wanted Arjuna to shoot the arrow and claim the credit. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has predicted, Piti vite achidata nagaradi gram, sarvatra prachara oibin moro nam. In every town and village, I will be known by my name. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has left it upon the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement to make the effort and get the credit. Just like in the early days of this movement, Prabhupada used to say that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has already predicted that this Krishna consciousness will go to every town and village of the world. But if you spread it, then you will get the credit. And if you don't spread it, somebody else will get the credit. So why do you want to give this credit to somebody else? Prabhupada used to say. So the point is, we are discussing different aspects of Sharanagati. So the first principle of Sharanagati is to completely depend upon the Lord. So completely depending upon the Lord does not mean that you do not make any effort, but it means that you understand that whatever material arrangement I may make, this is incomplete. But ultimately, if I have the blessings of the Lord, then I can succeed. So the devotee is exclusively dependent upon Krishna. Another aspect of Sharanagati is to accept everything favorable for spiritual advancement. Whatever may be auspicious for spiritual advancement, I will accept. And if something is detrimental for my spiritual advancement, I will reject. Just like we see that in North America, people are very conscious about their health, isn't it? Therefore, in all these food products that you buy, the nutrition value is written on the label. So, before they buy these packages, they see what is written on the label. And if something is good for their health, they will take. But if it is written that it has too much calories or too much fat, then they will not take, isn't it? So the same principle. A businessman, he will do a transaction that is good for his business. But if something will go at a loss, then he does not want a contract. So similarly, Rupa Goswami says, we must accept only what is favorable, and we must reject what is unfavorable. That understanding must be there. Then you can take shelter of Krishna. Then you must have full faith that devotional service will satisfy me. Devotional service will give me protection. This is another aspect of Sharanagati. Full faith in Krishna and His teachings. We must not have partial faith. We must not think that when Krishna says, Sarva dharmam paritajya, mam ekam shanam vraja, ham tvam sarva papi vayo, mokshami vasuchaha. We should not think that when Krishna says that He will give protection, maybe it is true, maybe it is not true. So, that is not proper. Sri Rupa Goswami says, full faith. Full faith means that you are always asking, am I serving Maya or am I serving Krishna? Am I Krishna Das or am I Maya Das? Krishna Das means servant of Krishna, and Maya Das means servant of Maya. So we should always be asking, am I Krishna Das or Krishna Dasi, or am I Maya Das or Maya Dasi? So we should always be checking at every minute. And if we are very careful to make sure that we are always Krishna Das, then we can be safe on the spiritual path. So we must have full faith that Krishna will protect me. And if we have full faith that Krishna will protect me, then we can engage in devotional service non-stop. Then another aspect of Sharanagati is to always live in the association of devotees where Krishna resides. This is very nicely explained by Prabhupada in a lecture which is published in Teachings of Queen Kunti. In that lecture, Prabhupada says very clearly, one should always live next to the temple so that he can always visit the deities of the Lord. He can always associate with the devotees of the Lord and thereby make spiritual progress. So, we have briefly discussed different aspects of Sharanagati because the goal of constant chanting and hearing is to eventually surrender to the Lord. Presently, surrendered to the desire for sense enjoyment. Presently, we are surrendered to the material mind. And therefore, we are constantly bewildered and confused. Arjuna in the Bhagavad-gītā was also confused and bewildered. In the seventh verse of the second chapter, Arjuna surrendered to Krishna and said, "Now I'm confused about my duty. Please tell me what I should do." Isn't it? He said, "I'm confused about my duty." So similarly, we all get confused about our duties. Isn't it? I do not know what is my duty, and I'm trying to speculate what is my duty. But Krishna says, do not speculate. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, once, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas at a very young age. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the friend of the father-in-law of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The father-in-law's name was Jagannath Mishra. So, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya one day told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "You are so young, you must hear the Vedanta." So he started explaining the Vedanta Sutra. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was hearing, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was speaking non-stop. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not ask any questions. Then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "You are not asking any questions? Why?" And then he said, "Because you are speculating. And because you are speculating on the words of Vedanta, I don't want to listen to that." So, we cannot speculate about what is our duty, what is not our duty, what is right, what is wrong. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gītā, the intricacies of action are very difficult to understand. In the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says the intricacies of action are very difficult to understand. It is very difficult to understand what I should do, what I should not do. Therefore, Krishna says that one must surrender and take direction from Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Then one can know what is dharma, what is adharma. We must go, we must not speculate. So, the important thing is Sharanagati. Non-stop we must be engaged in devotional service of the Lord. So if we are living in the association of devotees and executing devotional service, then it is easier to rectify our shortcomings. It is easier to rectify our weaknesses. So Queen Kunti is very nicely saying that non-stop we must get used to chanting and hearing. If we sincerely chant and hear, then there will be the development of love of God. Just like every morning we chant the 10 offenses in our temple, isn't it? Now what is the first offense that we chant? Yes. And also it is said that we should not be inattentive while chanting, isn't it? So we have to chant these holy names very, very attentively. And at the same time, be very alert to avoiding all the offenses. Bhau janma kare yadi śravaṇa kirtana tabhutana paya Krishna pade premadhana. That even if one goes on chanting, but if one is committing the 10 offenses, then he cannot develop love of God. But if one is chanting and trying to avoid the offenses, then there will be the development of love of God. So we see that Queen Kunti is very strongly emphasizing the importance of chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord and repeating the transcendental glories of the Lord. Parikshit Maharaj was hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam from whom? Śrīla Gopāla Kṛṣṇa. And Parikshit Maharaj was hearing the Bhagavatam and he was fasting. But he did not feel any hunger or thirst at all. He was fasting. He had not taken one drop of water. But he did not miss the food or the water, because he was absorbed in hearing the messages of Godhead. Krishna lifted the Govardhan hill to protect the inhabitants of Vrindavan. From whom? From Indra's anger. And the inhabitants of Vrindavan, they were all under the umbrella of the Govardhan hill for 1 week. But none of the inhabitants of Vrindavan felt any hunger or thirst for that 1 week. They were so absorbed in looking at Krishna and being with Krishna that they did not even think of their food or water. We all have experienced that sometimes we get absorbed in something that we like. And we get so absorbed in that something that we like, we even forget I haven't eaten my lunch, isn't it? Doesn't it happen sometimes? We get so absorbed in the restaurant or in the work or in the factory or the office or the temple that we don't even remember that I had to eat prasad. So, the important thing is absorption in Krishna consciousness. What Queen Kunti is saying, become absorbed in Krishna consciousness. This is what she is saying. Just like in the Bhagavatam, there is that very nice example that once an arrow maker was sharpening his arrows and the entourage of the king was passing by. The king had a whole band playing music, but the arrow maker was so absorbed in sharpening his arrows, he did not even look at the king or he did not even hear the sound. So Queen Kunti is begging us. Queen Kunti is begging us how to chant and hear non-stop so that we completely spiritualize our senses. So the devotee, he takes pleasure in glorifying the Lord. Sometimes, when it's japa time and somebody is falling asleep and somebody wakes you up, you get so offended. Or sometimes when somebody is sleeping in the class and somebody taps you on the back, say, no, I'm not sleeping, I'm wide awake. But actually, we get offended when somebody corrects us. But Queen Kunti is saying that the devotee takes pleasure in hearing and broadcasting the glories of the Lord. So if somebody is helping you to keep wide awake, you should tell him, Prabhu, thank you very much. You are my real friend. He is a real friend who is always correcting you. He is not a friend who is always trying to flatter you. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the great spiritual master of Prabhupada, he used to always say, if somebody is coming and flattering you, please get scared of him. So he said, beware of flatterers. If somebody is flattering you, please get scared of him. Because if somebody is flattering you, that means he wants something from you. So, in spiritual life, our process is to always seek assistance, not to always look for flattery. In material life, we're always looking for flattery. Therefore, you go to a shop, the salesman will try and flatter you. Because, why do they flatter you? Because we have strong ego. The ego needs to be fanned all the time. My strong ego is saying, I am the smartest man alive. I know everything that is right. I don't need direction. I know everything. This is ahankar vimudatma kartamiti manyate. Bhagavad-gītā says, the living entity influenced by ahankar, he gets lost in the cycle of birth and death. So, what we have to do is counteract this ahankar. And this ahankar can be counteracted by this constant chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. So we have to mold our life in such a way that we are always able to chant and hear. And if we are constantly able to chant and hear, then there will be pleasure. It is not that a brahmachari comes to Krishna consciousness. He surrenders everything at the feet of the spiritual master and Krishna, and he is fool number one. It is not that when you surrender, you're fool number one. No. Then you're intelligent number one. And when you don't surrender, that is when actually you're fool number one. Because surrendering to the Lord is beautiful. Therefore Queen Kunti is saying, this process is very enjoyable. So, if we know that this process is enjoyable, then we will take to this path with complete determination. Just like Maharaj Rishabdev has said, Tapo Divyam Putraka Yena Sattvam Shudaye Dasmad Brahma Sokyam Tavanantam. Maharaj Rishabdev had 100 sons, and he considered it his prime responsibility to instruct the 100 sons how to go back to God. So Maharaj Rishabdev said, Tapo Divyam Putraka, my dear sons, if you have to practice austerity for the pleasure of Krishna, in exchange for that, there will be the realization of spiritual happiness. So, the point is, when we surrender to the Lord, there is a realization of spiritual happiness in exchange. Therefore, Krishna is saying in the 18th chapter, Brahma bhuta prasanatman asocati na kaṁsati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. That one who is transcendently situated, he is always joyful. So, one is always joyful when he is engaged in devotional service. And when he is engaged in service of Krishna, then the spiritual joy is there. Why? Because Krishna reciprocates with his devotees. Krishna reciprocates with our surrender. And Krishna told the Vasa Muni had offended this devotee of the Lord, Amrish Maharaj. So Krishna told the Vasa Muni that my devotee is so dear that he makes all types of sacrifices for me. Therefore he resides in my heart, and I reside in his heart. So Queen Kunti is describing how by becoming an elevated devotee of the Lord, one can stop the repetition of birth and death. Otherwise, to stop the samsara of birth and death is not easy. If one executes Krishna consciousness but not perfectly, still birth and death cycle will go on. O Brahma Bhuvana Loka Panaravartana Rajana Mam Upeti Kana Jana Pana Janmana Vidyate. Krishna says, Pana Janma. If you want to free yourself from another birth, then you have to come to my abode. So you can only go to spiritual abode of the Lord if we are fully trying to become dependent upon the mercy of the Lord, if we are fully trying to become dependent on the instructions of the Lord. And if we are fully trying to become dependent on the instructions of the Lord, then there will be the manifestation of all spiritual symptoms. Just like Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami was once traveling to Jagannath Puri. So while he was traveling to Jagannath Puri, on the way he went through a forest of Jarāsandha, that is in central India, Madhya Pradesh. And on the way, he developed a disease, and his whole body was full of pus. So he was thinking, now when I go to Jagannath Puri, I will see the big wrath of Lord Jagannath, and I will throw myself under the wheel of Lord Jagannath and commit suicide. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, is God. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew what is in Sanatan's mind. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to embrace Sanatan when he saw him. And as soon as he embraced him, all his diseases were gone. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you have no right to commit suicide because this body doesn't belong to you anymore. This body belongs to me, and I will use this body to establish principles of religion and to broadcast the glories of religion. So, this is the point. The Lord uses the body of a devotee to establish dharma and to broadcast dharma. Krishna, he says, Paritanaya sadhunam vinashata duskatam dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I appear in order to establish the principles of religion. Isn't it? Yada yadahi dharmasa gnani bhavatir bharata. I appeared again and again in different parts of the globe. So very often people tell us, now Kali Yuga is so deep, isn't it? So where is Krishna? Where is Krishna taking birth, isn't it? So Prabhupada explains in one lecture that Krishna has taken birth in Kali Yuga in the womb of this Krishna consciousness movement. So Krishna has incarnated today through the medium of ISKCON. Because the dedication of ISKCON is, the mission of ISKCON is to broadcast the glories of the Lord. It has no other mission. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami, you cannot commit suicide. I am going to use your body to establish dharma. So this body of ours has to be used to establish dharma, to establish what is right and what is wrong. Just like our devotees, they go out and do book distribution, or life membership, or Harinam, or Prasad distribution. These are activities by which we establish dharma. These are activities by which we give the Lord an opportunity to use our bodies to establish dharma. This is important to understand. And Sanatana Goswami later on went to Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur, as we know, was engaged in chanting the holy names of the Lord 300,000 times a day. 300,000 times. He would not even eat without finishing his rounds. Sometimes our ISKCON devotees have this principle. I'm not going to eat prasad till I finish my 16 rounds. So that is good principle. When you make a determination, I'm going to first finish my rounds before I do anything. So Haridas Thakur, he would not he would not eat or talk to anybody till he would finish his round. So Sanatana Goswami, when he met Haridas Thakur, he said, some people, they chant the glories of the Lord, but they do not preach. And some people, they preach the glories of the Lord, but they do not chant. But you are simultaneously doing both. You are chanting and preaching. So Prabhupada says in the Purport that this is the mission of every devotee of this Krishna conscious movement. To chant and preach. Just like if you go to Vrindavan, India, you will see many people in Vrindavan, they do chanting, but they do no preaching. And there's so many so-called sadhus from India who do big preaching, but they don't do any chanting. So that is also useless. So Chaitanya Sanatana Goswami told Haridas, you are chanting and preaching. So that is important, chanting and preaching. Therefore, what is our logo? Just like different companies have different logos, isn't it? General Motors has a logo, complete satisfaction, and Eaton has a logo, money back guarantee, isn't it? So we also have a logo. We also have a slogan. What is this? Preaching is the essence, isn't it? And preaching is the and purity is the force. And books are the basis. So books are the basis for preaching. But the desire to give these books out will only be there if purity is there. If you have no purity, then no desire to preach. The desire to preach comes from purity. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we may be able to force someone to go out. But then if that purity is not there from the heart, if one is not strictly following sadhana bhakti, then the desire to go out and preach will not be very strong. So books are the basis. Why are the books the basis? Because in these books there is knowledge how to give up Maya. That is why. In these books there is knowledge how to stop committing suicide. When we engage in sinful life, when we reject Krishna, when we stop our chanting, then we stop doing seva, devotional service, then we are simply committing suicide. So, the books are telling us how not to commit suicide. Purity is a force. The desire to preach will come from purity. Just like yesterday I was explaining that with our impure senses, we can't understand Krishna. We can't understand the process of devotional service. But with our pure senses, we can understand. So we are presently impure. But if we become pure, then we can understand. And purity is the force and preaching is the essence. So we must always look for opportunities to preach. Actually, even if you go to the shop to buy bhogaran, even if you're going by bus, even if you're going by train, wherever you're going, if you want to preach, you can preach. People love to talk. So you can just pick up an opportunity to start talking about Krishna. And don't think it is difficult. Every time I fly on the plane, I always make friends with the person sitting next to me. And I get the opportunity to talk to him. So it's not difficult. We just have to have the determination that I must preach. When you are engaged in preaching about Krishna, then you will always remember the philosophy. But if you're not engaged in preaching, then you will get rusted. Just like an iron bar. An iron bar, if it is not in use, what happens? It gets rusted, isn't it? You follow, isn't it? An iron bar gets rusted if it is not being used. So we get rusted if we don't preach. Therefore, we should always be engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord. And then we can stop the repetition of birth and death. After all, Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Gita, that of all my devotees, the dearmost devotee is one who is always engaged in spreading my glory. So if we are engaged in spreading the glories of Krishna, then we become very dear to Krishna. And by becoming dear to Krishna, we get closer to Krishna and achieve the ultimate goal of life. So even though the devotee has no material desire, but by serving Krishna and by surrendering to Krishna, the devotee becomes dear to Krishna and is able to make spiritual advancement. So Queen Kunti is telling us in this verse that we should constantly hear and chant and repeat about the transcendental activities of the Lord. So we repeat about the transcendental activities of the Lord. We read about the pastimes of the Lord. We read about the instructions of the Lord. We read about the beautiful form of the Lord. And not only do we read, we tell others about this also. And by telling others about it, we are enlivening ourselves and enlivening others. And by this transcendental engagement, we are able to develop love of God and thus become free from the cycle of birth and death. Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that we must become transcendental gardeners. And anybody who bites on this fruit of love of God will become free from the cycle of birth and death. So we should meditate on this verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam very deeply. And by meditating on this verse of the Bhagavatam deeply, we will be able to develop love of God and thereby make spiritual advancement. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Questions? Good question. How to know what is good, what is bad? So you have to go to the spiritual doctor. You cannot, just like when you have pain in the heart, you don't go in front of the mirror and do your operation yourself. You go to the doctor to find out, isn't it? Therefore it is said, Guru Sadhu Shastra. You cannot do anything outside Guru Sadhu Shastra. The Shastra, the words of God, Guru, the agent of God, Sadhu, the great sages. So if we follow this path, then there will be no confusion. Understand? More questions? Yeah. Well, you can set your priorities with the assistance of the temple authorities. We should take the guidance from the temple authorities, and that will enable you to establish your priorities. Yeah? Or we have to have a playroom for the children next door. Yeah. I'm sorry, you should speak loud right now. About how to cheat. How our duty, how not to speculate. By having faith that I have to take direction. You can avoid speculation by having faith that I need direction. The problem is that we are all thinking that I know everything, I don't need any direction. That is when all the problems start. Do you understand? So don't speculate. Yeah. Well, should ask some philosophical questions based on the verse. Yeah. So, you were saying that not only that in this country, even in India, the government doesn't do anything to promote Krishna consciousness. Even in Vrindavan, you see Krishna and Maya side by side. So basically, we all have to make the effort ourselves. So therefore, Prabhupada has given us this process. We chant every morning 16 rounds. We come to Mangalarti, you come to class. So with all this, you get enough energy to go on for the next 22 hours. Just like you have these battery rechargers. You know, your battery runs out. You recharge them in the wall for 2 hours. And after you can recharge it in the wall for 2 hours, then it runs for 6 hours, isn't it? So, if we recharge our batteries every morning for 4 or 5 hours, then for 19 hours we are okay. But if you don't recharge your batteries in the morning, then we will be like a tape recorder plays with weak batteries. You understand? We will not be enthusiastic. Just like you see, when you have a tape recorder with weak batteries, then when you put it on, the voice is so funny, isn't it? It is so slow, you feel like laughing, you feel like closing it. So similarly, when our spiritual battery is not strong, we are not enthusiastic in our service. But if you want your spiritual batteries to be enthusiastic, if you want your spiritual batteries to be strong, then please recharge your batteries every morning. We agree with you. Sure, we don't say meditate all day. Our devotees are not here all day. After prasad in 1 hour, the temple will be deserted. You telephone any temple in ISKCON after 11 o'clock, nobody even answers the telephone. Because everybody is out on the streets. So we don't say sit in the temple all day. We say don't sit in the temple all day. What works for Krishna? Like Parikshit, he invites, they run the restaurant. They don't stay here all day. Our devotees go out on the street and distribute books. So you do a job or whatever, you can stay at home, no problem. But just chant and all in the morning. Morning hours are most favorable for spiritual advancement. We have Kula Shekhar, he's an artist. He paints all day. You understand? In the morning he comes here and now after prasad he's going to paint all day. So, we don't say, so when you're painting all day, that is meditation on Krishna. When you're serving Krishna all day in some practical service, that is meditation. Yes, so because they are beautiful things, you use them in the service of the most beautiful person, God. So we agree they're beautiful, so use it for Krishna. Prabhupada used to say this beautiful human body. If you look at a human body, it looks more handsome than the body of a dog or a cat. So Prabhupada used to say, use this beautiful human body to serve God. Yes, Lakshmana. What's that? How can one choose? Oh, how can one choose? That's not difficult. Krishna from the heart will dictate. If you have a sincere desire, but somebody who has preached to you, somebody who is preaching to you, somebody can help you go back to Godhead, you select. There are no philosophical questions. These are all. Ask some questions related to the verse. Yes. Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter s'il vous plaît? Oh, c'est bon question. Il faut penser de Krishna ou penser de service à Krishna. Il faut faire les deux. Krishna who speak of Bhagavad-gītā, il faut faire les deux. Krishna speak of Gita, tasma sarveshu kaleshu ma manasma yuddhacha. Krishna demande Arjun, vous allez dans la gare, mais en même temps vous pensez de moi. Tu devais faire votre service et en même temps vous devez penser de Krishna. Pas que vous seulement faisiez votre service et vous pensez pas de Krishna. For example, si vous sortez dehors pour faire la distribution des livres, quand vous êtes dehors, distribution des livres, il faut toujours penser, bon, ici j'ai l'occasion à servir Krishna, donner quelqu'un la connaissance pour qu'elle, il faut quitter la cycle de naissance et mort. Vous comprenez? Si vous nettoyez le temple de Krishna, il faut toujours penser, moi je fais ce travail pour Krishna. Si vous cuisinez dans la cuisine, vous devez penser toujours, bon, je fais cette cuisine, pas pour moi-même, mais pour Radha Manor. If somebody is cooking in the kitchen, he should always think, I'm cooking for Krishna, I'm cooking for Krishna. And by just thinking like that, the cooking will become first class. So, yes, good question. So, est-ce que vous tous ont compris la question? No, I want everyone to understand. Can somebody La question seker, kula seker dika, ila boca, ila boco de devo que se te ground on the movement, e mentana el sono maya. Es como pedir que Krishna don para la protección se devo, n'est-ce pas? C'est la question. So, if somebody falls into Maya, even if he was a big devotee, it is because he did not take the precaution. Just like once Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was old and he was sick. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Haridas Thakur, now Haridas, you are sick. Don't chant. Take rest. You have chanted all your life. But Haridas Thakur said, no! I cannot stop chanting. If I stop chanting, I will fall into Maya. So, once Prabhupada was greeting the deities, and he was speaking, every time Prabhupada would greet the deities, he would speak something. Some devotees asked him, what were you speaking? Prabhupada said, I was praying to Krishna that I may not fall in Maya. So, the devotee is always scared that he may not fall in Maya. So he's always praying to Krishna that I may not fall in Maya. You understand? The devotee doesn't think, oh, I have done service for 20 years, now even if I sit down with women, nothing will happen. Like a sannyasi doesn't think, now for 20 years I was chanting Hare Krishna, so I can flirt with a woman, nothing will happen. You follow? If one is very careful, then Krishna says nothing will happen. But if one is not careful, then, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire? When it's like, it is slippery. If you go on this road, when I go in the back to that house in the back, the ice is very slippery, isn't it? So on that slippery track of land from here to Gorochand's house in the back, if you don't walk carefully, you will slip, isn't it? And if you walk carefully, then you can cross over the slippery ice. So this material world is very slippery. It's slippery for everyone. Advanced devotee does not mean that he is not careful. Advanced devotee means that he is more careful. You understand? Advanced devotee doesn't mean that now I have license, I can do what I want. Even if he has license, he will not use that license. Prabhupada never used the license. He was always very strict in everything. Because we must be very strict. You understand? So even if I am advanced, if I become careless, I can have accidents. Just like you may have a pilot. Sometimes you may have a driver. He has been driving for 50 years. But that doesn't mean he cannot have accidents. If even a driver with 50 years experience, if he becomes careless on the highway, he'll have accidents. So we have to be careful. Yeah. Just one thing. But now, this does not mean that we as neophyte devotees say, oh, anyone can have accidents, so all gurus are bogus. This doesn't mean that also. You understand? Yeah. Yeah. She doesn't say easy life. She says, my Lord, my difficulties may increase. Because the more the difficulties increase, the more I will remember you. But she doesn't say, give me easy life. Yes. But everybody doesn't realize it. In India you go, you see so many pigs on the road. Not everywhere, but in some places. So, the pig is eating stool. You tell the pig, no, come on, take this nice rasgulla, gulab jamun, sweets, cakes. The pig will not take it. The pig will say, no, I want that pill. You go to the fly. The flies are always sitting on stool. But you try and take the fly away to a clean place, the fly will not go. The crow, you know the crow, do you see crows in Canada? Not so much. But everyone knows what a crow is, no? Huh? You know what a crow is? You don't know what a crow is? Crow. Come appeler crow en français? Huh? So, the crow is like a bird. It flies in the sky. But the crow will only go where there is dirt. The crow will not go if the place is very clean. But the swan, you know swan? Swan? Huh? So the swan will only go where it is clean and not where it is dirty. So you tell the crow, come where it is clean. It will say no. You tell the swan to go somewhere where it is dirty. It will say no. So, a devotee is like a swan. And the materialists are like crows. So what you do? People are suffering, but still they say, no. You go to the hospital. Last few years ago, I gave a lecture at the Calgary Old Age Home. I have some disciples who do some work there. So I gave a lecture. They were all old people in wheelchairs, everything. And I gave a very general lecture, not a Bhagavatam class. But even the old people, they were not interested at all. They are suffering. They can't even walk. They can't even... You go to the hospital, go to this hospital nearby and try preaching in hospitals. How many people will surrender? Very few. Isn't it? So that is the problem. We are always thinking, no, I'm happy. Okay? Okay. Yes, Chaitanya Priya? They should, but they are so intoxicated with material vision that they don't listen. Yeah, last question. She had a question? I'm sorry, it's hard for me to listen. Well, don't worry. The fact that you're still here means you understand. Otherwise you would not be here. So, the fact that you're still here, you do your rounds, you do your service, means you understand. So don't worry. Hare Krishna.